Okay, so you know that feeling when you click a search result? Like, what actually happens after that? It's way more interesting than you might think.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, I found my answer, done.
Right, it's this whole psychological journey, and that's what we're going to unpack today, diving into Beyond Discovery, the psychology of search decisions.
This source is packed with insights about what really goes on in your mind after you hit that search button.
Our mission today, to kind of expose the hidden forces shaping those decisions you make. We're talking about understanding your online behavior better.
And maybe learning to spot some of those sneaky tactics used online to influence you.
Okay, so the first big thing this source talks about is the post-search continuum. Basically, the whole stretch from seeing those search results to, finally deciding on something.
But to really get this, we got to ditch an old way of thinking.
You mean the whole funnel thing, awareness, interest, desire, action, that nice straight line?
Exactly. Beyond Discovery says that's way too simplistic. Your actual journey is more like a constellation.
A constellation.
Yeah, think about it. You're not just marching towards a purchase in a straight line. You're kind of orbiting around different bits of information, jumping between needs and considerations.
So, like, I might almost buy something, get distracted, come back a week later with a totally different search.
Exactly. And the source gives some great examples. Like, how many times have you filled an online shopping cart, then abandoned it, only to come back days later and finally buy everything?
Oh, all the time. Or starting research for a big purchase on my phone, continuing on the laptop, then finally deciding on my tablet.
Right. It's not just about the clicks. It's about businesses realizing that your journey isn't linear. They need to anticipate your needs throughout this whole orbiting process.
And those little bursts of info gathering, those micro moment Google talk about, they fit perfectly into this.
Yeah, you get a sudden question, a search for it, get your answer, and that nugget of information just joins your mental orbit.
It's not this long session leading to a decision.
And the crazy thing is, companies like Google have totally caught on to this. Their whole optimization strategy is geared toward these micro moments. Understanding your journey is, well, kind of all over the place.
But this isn't just some abstract idea. The source has a really cool example from a real estate website. They found that people were doing like 12 to 18 searches over 4 to 6 weeks before contacting an agent.
Crazy, right? So instead of trying to get those instant conversions, they completely changed their content to support that whole research phase.
So they made neighborhood guides, mortgage calculators, market trend reports.
Exactly. Stuff people actually want during that stage. The takeaway here is you have to understand your audience's real research process, even if it takes a while, and give them valuable stuff at every stage.
Don't just focus on getting that click right away.
And the result for the real estate site, a 34% jump in leads, even though their website traffic numbers didn't change that much, it proves that giving people what they need when they need it works.
Totally. And there's this university example that shows a similar idea. They realized choosing a program is a huge decision, right? Tons of things to think about.
So they added a Save for Later button and tools to compare programs side by side.
Which makes so much sense. It acknowledges that people need time to make these kinds of decisions.
And they saw a 27% increase in applications just by making those changes. It's all about respecting the time and effort you put into these choices.
So the big takeaway here is that just looking at clicks and time spent on a page doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah, the source calls this the metric centricity trap. You can get so hung up on the numbers that you miss what really matters to you, the user.
It's tempting to just look at a high bounce rate and think, oh, this content sucks.
But what if people are leaving for other reasons? Maybe the content is too intense for them at that moment, or maybe they just got distracted.
And even Google is starting to move away from just those basic engagement metrics.
Right, they're looking at satisfaction signals, which is basically trying to figure out if the content actually helped you, not just if you clicked on it.
Beyond Discovery has a great example of this from a high-end audio equipment site. They had tons of traffic, were targeting all the right keywords, but weren't selling much.
And when they dug deeper, they found they were focusing all their content on technical specs. Easy to measure, but
not what actually makes people buy fancy speakers.
Exactly. People buy based on the experience, the emotion of listening to music. So they shifted their content to focus on how the equipment would make music feel. They described the emotions it would evoke.
And boom, 28% increase in conversions, same tech specs, just a different way of talking about them. It makes you think about how often you choose things based on feeling, not just the cold, hard facts.
Totally. And there's another example from a mental health resource website. They had high bounce rates on their pages about depression, which, at first glance seems bad.
But when they actually talk to users,
they found that people weren't leaving because the content was bad. They were often just feeling overwhelmed or not ready to deal with it right now.
that makes sense. It's a heavy topic.
So instead of trying to force people to take action, they added gentler ways to re-engage later, bookmarking or less direct calls to action.
It's like respecting that people need to process things at their own pace. It makes me wonder how much my own online behavior is driven by my mood at that moment.
All the time, right? And this whole idea of like the hidden factors driving our online behavior leads us straight to cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts our brains use that can totally mess with our decisions after a search.
Ah, yes, the good old work of Kahneman and Tversky. They showed us how predictable our irrationality can be.
Totally. And Beyond Discovery highlights some key biases that are super relevant online. Let's start with the anchoring effect.
Anchoring.
It's like the first piece of information you see basically sets a benchmark in your mind, even if it's irrelevant to your actual needs.
Oh, I get it. The source mentions Google playing around with price history graphs in their shopping results. So seeing that initial price, even if it's way higher, makes a sale price seem like a steal, right? Even if it's still more than you wanted to spend.
Exactly. Have you ever fallen for that? Seeing a huge discount and thinking, wow, what a deal. Even if the final price was still kind of high.
Oh, totally. It's like that initial price anchors my perception of what's a good deal.
Another tricky one is the choice paradox. You'd think more options is always better, but too much choice can actually paralyze us.
That's so true. I get overwhelmed by endless options online all the time. Like, just give me 3 good choices, please.
The source mentions a software company that actually saw a 23% increase in trial signups just by reducing the number of features they compared on our page.
Less is more sometimes.
Definitely. Then there's hyperbolic discounting. This is all about our preference for instant gratification, choosing a smaller reward now over a bigger one later.
The reason I procrastinate.
Exactly. The source talks about how an online education platform got more people to enroll in their longer courses by emphasizing early wins and breaking the material into smaller chunks.
So you get that sense of accomplishment sooner. Smart.
And lastly, there's the endowment effect, the idea that we value things more once we feel like we own them, even if it's just an item in a virtual shopping cart.
Makes sense. The source says some e-commerce sites are using this by changing their language, like your items instead of cart items, to reinforce that feeling of ownership.
And they're even showing visualizations of the post-purchase experience to really get you attached to that potential purchase.
It's like you can almost picture yourself using it already.
Right. And those small changes led to a 17% reduction in abandoned carts in one example.
So we've covered biases, but how do we actually process all this information when making decisions?
Well, Beyond Discovery brings up Bloom's taxonomy, which you might remember from school. It basically outlines different levels of thinking.
Oh yeah, like remembering facts, understanding concepts, applying knowledge, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the source applies this to decision making. It says, like, think of your brain processing information in stages, almost like climbing a ladder. That ladder is Bloom's taxonomy.
Okay, I'm following.
So first, you just need to remember the options. Then you have to understand what each one offers. After that, you apply that knowledge by like picturing how each option would work in your life.
Gotcha. Then what?
Then you start to analyze, breaking down the pros and cons of each choice. After that comes evaluation, where you decide which option best fits your needs. And finally, you might even create something new by combining information or thinking of new ways to use the product or service.
That makes total sense. The source mentions a home renovation company that saw a 43% increase in leads by making different content for each of these stages.
Yeah, they had basic guides for understanding the basics, visualization tools to help you apply the ideas, comparison charts, and so on.
So they weren't just throwing a bunch of information at you all at once.
Right. They were giving us the right type of information at the right time, depending on where you were in your decision-making process.
There's also a cool example about a medical device company. They redesigned their website to match the different stages patients go through when researching treatment options.
They started with basic info about the condition, then gradually got more specific, even using visualizations to show potential outcomes. And you know what? They saw a 52% jump in consultation requests.
Wow, that's huge. It just goes to show that understanding how people learn and make decisions can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And, we've talked a lot about the rational side of making choices, but Beyond Discovery also digs into the emotional side of things.
It's funny because we often think of emotions as getting in the way of making good decisions, but the source actually argues that emotions are crucial to the process.
Yeah, they're not just some side effect, they're essential.
And this reminds me of the work of Antonio Damasio, who studied people with damage to the parts of their brains that process emotions.
And they had a really hard time making even basic decisions.
Right, like what to eat for lunch. It really showed how important emotions are to making any kind of choice.
So Beyond Discovery points out a few key emotional dimensions that are at play after you search for something. One is identity alignment, basically how much a choice reflects who you are or who you want to be.
Makes sense. Like a luxury watch brand might focus on their heritage and craftsmanship, It's not just a timepiece, it's a statement about your style and values.
Right. And the source even says that kind of marketing led to a 34% increase in conversions for one brand.
So playing to people's sense of identity can be super effective. What else?
Another big one is risk mitigation. Emotions like fear and trust play a huge role in how we perceive risk.
So if a website can make me feel safe and build trust, I'm more likely to take a chance on them.
Exactly. Like the source talks about a healthcare provider that focused on reassuring content and being very clear about the next steps.
That makes sense. Healthcare is a big deal. It's natural to feel some anxiety.
Right. And by reducing that anxiety, they saw a 28% increase in bookings.
So addressing those emotional barriers is key. What's the last one?
Future projection, which is basically our emotional response to the outcomes we imagine.
So like visualizing yourself using the product and achieving some desired result.
Yeah, exactly. Like remember those retirement planning tools that show you living your best life on a beach somewhere?
Oh yeah, those always get me.
They're tapping into those positive feelings about security and happiness. And the source says that approach actually led to a 38% increase in enrollment for one company.
It's powerful stuff. It makes you realize how much our emotions shape what we do online.
Absolutely. And on top of our individual psychology and emotions, there's also the social dimension. Like, we rarely make decisions in a vacuum, right?
Totally. We're influenced by other people all the time, even online.
Right. Beyond Discovery dives into a few key social dimensions. One is peer validation, which is basically looking for approval from people we see as similar to ourselves.
So like reading reviews from people who have the same needs as me.
Or testimonials from people in your same profession, or who share your hobbies. That's why those people like you sections on websites can be so persuasive.
And the source even gives an example of a specialized equipment manufacturer that saw a 41% increase in leads just by highlighting those peer experiences.
It's powerful stuff. Then there's tribal signaling. That's when you make choices to show that you belong to a particular group.
Oh, I totally get that. Like buying certain brands to fit in with a certain crowd.
Exactly. The source talks about how different parenting product lines are marketed. They tap into different parenting philosophies to create that sense of belonging, and it led to a 36% increase in conversions.
So it's not just about the product itself, it's about what it says about you.
Right, and the source also mentions segment-specific social proof, which is basically showing examples that are super relevant to the person viewing them. Like, if you're a business owner, seeing testimonials from other business owners is going to be way more persuasive than, just generic praise.
That makes sense. It's like, okay, these people get me.
Exactly, and one company saw a 53% increase in conversions using that approach.
So we've covered biases, information processing, emotions, and social stuff. How do we tie it all together?
Well, Beyond Discovery offers a cool concept, the theory of relativity for search experiences. It's the idea that the value of a search experience isn't a fixed thing. It depends on your individual context at that moment.
Okay, that's intriguing. Tell me more.
They even have a formula. Search value equals content quality x psychological alignment x contextual relevance. So even if the content is amazing, it won't be effective if it doesn't resonate with you psychologically and fit your needs at that specific time.
That's why sometimes even a super detailed article doesn't quite hit the spot, while something shorter and more personal feels perfect.
Exactly. And the source talks about a career services platform that saw way better engagement and conversions by creating content targeted at different psychological states, like someone who's desperately job hunting versus someone just casually exploring their options.
It's about meeting people where they are, emotionally and situationally.
Right. And that brings us to this fascinating idea the source calls quantum optimization.
Quantum optimization, like what does physics have to do with search?
Well, it's kind of a metaphor, but it's about moving beyond traditional SEO, which often assumes people follow a predictable path, and recognizing that your intent can be, well, kind of fuzzy.
So, like, I might have several reasons for searching for the same thing at different times.
Exactly. The source calls this state superposition, like in quantum physics, where a particle can be in multiple states at once.
Okay, I'm kind of getting it.
And the source talks about how just measuring or observing something, like tracking user behavior online, can actually change that behavior, the observer effect.
It's like being aware of being watched changes how you act.
Right, and then there's entanglement, which is basically the idea that all your interactions with a website are interconnected.
Okay, that makes sense.
And just like you can't perfectly know both the position and momentum of a particle in quantum physics, you can't perfectly optimize for every single factor in someone's search journey, the uncertainty principle at work.
So there's always going to be some level of unpredictability.
Right. But eventually, through interacting with content, all those potential intents narrow down into a specific action, what the source call a wave function collapse.
It's like all those possibilities collapse into one definite choice.
Exactly. And the source gives a cool example of an e-commerce platform that shifted from just targeting keywords to trying to model user intent.
So instead of treating everyone searching for running shoes the same, they try to figure out if you're a beginner, a marathon runner looking for trail shoes, or just browsing, and then tailor your experience.
Right. And they saw a 47% boost in sales just by making that change.
It's like they're reading your mind.
In a way. And another example is this healthcare provider that used adaptive content paths that changed based on your intent, leading to way more bookings.
So websites are getting smarter about understanding what we actually want, even if we don't know it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've come a long way in this deep dive into the psychology of search decisions. We've busted the myth of the linear funnel and embraced the messy reality of the constellation model.
We've learned that clicks don't tell the whole story and that psychological alignment and emotional resonance are crucial.
And we've seen how social influences play a huge role in shaping our choices online.
Plus, we even got a glimpse of the future with quantum optimization.
The big takeaway from Beyond Discovery is that the most effective online experiences are the ones that understand your complex, messy, and emotional journey.
It's not just about providing information, it's about connecting with people on a deeper level.
So here's something to ponder next time you're online. Think about the subtle forces that might be shaping your choices and how those websites might be tapping into those forces.
We encourage you to be more mindful of what's going on beneath the surface and to approach your online experiences with a critical eye.
Because the more you understand about the psychology of search, the better equipped you are to make choices that truly serve your needs.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even start seeing the internet in a whole new light.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, happy searching.